The cavern was dark and silent, except for the soft crunch of Marcus Hale's boots against the rocky ground. He adjusted the beam of his flashlight, the pale light dancing across ancient walls covered in strange, glowing symbols. Marcus, an archaeologist known for chasing forgotten relics, had stumbled upon this site by sheer luck while exploring a distant, uncharted planet. His breath caught as the beam landed on something unusual, a pedestal in the center of the cavern, shimmering with a faint blue light. On it rested a sword unlike anything he had ever seen. Its blade seemed to be made of crystal, glowing faintly, and the hilt was intricately designed with alien runes that seemed to pulse like a heartbeat. This is incredible," Marcus whispered, his voice echoing through the cavern. His AI assistant, Luna, chimed through his earpiece. "Be cautious, Marcus. The energy readings from that sword are off the charts. It's not an ordinary artifact." Marcus crouched closer, his curiosity overriding caution. The air around the sword felt heavy, as though it carried the weight of centuries. He hesitated but couldn't resist the urge to touch it. Slowly, he extended his hand and gripped the hilt. The moment his fingers wrapped around it, a surge of energy shot through his body. His vision blurred, and the cavern disappeared. He was standing in a vast throne room, towering columns stretching to an endless ceiling. At the center was a throne made of black crystal, and seated upon it was a figure cloaked in shadow. "Who dares disturb my rest?" a deep feminine voice boomed. Marcus stumbled back, his heart racing. The figure rose, stepping into the light. It was a woman, or something resembling one. Her skin was iridescent, her eyes glowing like twin stars, and her presence radiated both power and fury. "You," she said, pointing directly at Marcus. "You've touched what is mine. Return it, or face the wrath of Jalara, Queen of the Xenari." Before Marcus could respond, the vision shattered, and he was back in the cavern. He gasped for air, clutching the sword tightly. "Marcus, are you okay?" Luna's voice broke through his panic. I think I just saw her. The owner of this sword," Marcus muttered, his mind racing. "You need to leave. Now," Luna urged. But Marcus couldn't. Something about the sword, about the vision, called to him. He had questions, and somehow he knew this sword held the answers. As he exited the cavern with the sword strapped to his back, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that he had just invited something far greater and far more dangerous into his life. Far away, on a distant world, Queen Jalara stirred. Her eyes snapped open, glowing with anger. "The thief will pay," she whispered. Marcus leaned back in the pilot's chair of his small exploration ship, the Orion, the mysterious sword lying on the console in front of him. It pulsed faintly, casting an eerie blue glow across the cockpit. His AI assistant, Luna, spoke through the ship's speakers, her voice filled with concern. "Marcus, I've been analyzing the inscriptions on the sword. The language is ancient, older than any known galactic civilization. Older than the Xenari Empire." Marcus asked, still staring at the weapon. His heart hadn't stopped racing since he found it in the cavern. "Yes," Luna replied. "This sword, it's not just a relic. It's called the Sword of Jalara, and it belongs to someone very powerful, someone you just woke up." Marcus ran a hand through his messy brown hair, trying to process the situation. "Who is Jalara?" "She's the queen of the Xenari," Luna explained, "a race once known for conquering entire star systems. According to my records, she vanished centuries ago, but legends say she was never dead, only waiting. And now you've triggered her return." Marcus frowned, leaning closer to the inscriptions. The markings seemed alive, shifting under his gaze. "So what does this sword do? Why is it so important?" "The legends aren't clear," Luna admitted, "but it's said that the Sword of Jalara can either unite or destroy entire civilizations. It's a weapon, a symbol of power, and something far beyond our understanding." Marcus couldn't help but chuckle nervously. "Great, so I've just stolen the galaxy's most dangerous artifact." You didn't steal it, Marcus, Luna corrected. You found it. But Jaelara won't see it that way. The ship suddenly shook, and alarms blared. Marcus snapped to attention. What's going on? We're being tracked, Luna said urgently. I'm picking up an energy signal. No, several. Ships are closing in fast. Marcus's heart sank. Let me guess. Ictionary. Correct, Luna confirmed. They found you. Marcus scrambled to his controls as the cockpit lit up with red warnings. Through the window, he saw streaks of light in the distance, ships breaking out of hyperspace, sleek black vessels with glowing red edges closed in, their weapons already powering up. Marcus, we need to get out of here, Luna urged. I'm on it, Marcus shouted, flipping switches and gripping the controls. The Orion roared to life, its engines propelling the ship forward, as plasma bolts streaked past it. As Marcus weaved through the barrage of fire, Luna provided tactical updates. They're trying to disable the ship, not destroy it. They want the sword. Marcus gritted his teeth, his knuckles white on the controls. Well, they're not getting it. The Orion dove through a debris field, dodging wreckage from ancient battles. The Xenari ships followed, relentless in their pursuit. Marcus pushed the ship to its limits, narrowly escaping each time they closed the gap. Finally, the Orion jumped into hyperspace, leaving the Xenari ships behind. Marcus let out a shaky breath, his mind racing. Marcus, Luna said, her voice grim, this is just the beginning. You've caught the attention of a queen who won't stop until she gets her sword back. Marcus glanced at the weapon, its glow steady and ominous. Then I guess I'd better figure out how to survive. Far across the galaxy, in the heart of a forgotten star system, Queen Jaelara awoke from her centuries-long slumber. Her crystalline throne glowed softly as energy surged through her body, reactivating her dormant powers. Her eyes, twin orbs of violet fire, snapped open. She clenched her fists, feeling the disturbance that had pulled her from her rest. The sword, she murmured, her voice low but laced with fury. In front of her, kneeling figures bowed in submission, her elite warriors, the Crimson Vanguards. They were clad in dark, shimmering armor, their weapons humming with energy. Speak, she commanded, her voice echoing through the vast throne room. One of the warriors raised his head. My queen, the beacon was activated. The sword of Jaelara has been disturbed. Disturbed. Jaelara's tone turned icy, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop. Explain. A human, my queen, the warrior said, his voice trembling slightly. He took it from its resting place on Xerithus Prime. The name of the planet made Jaelara's anger boil. Xerithus Prime, the last place where her empire's power had fallen, was sacred to her. The thought of a human, a creature she considered beneath notice, daring to touch her sword was an insult she could not tolerate. A human dares to claim what is mine. Jaelara rose from her throne, her towering figure radiating authority and rage. Does he think this is a game? The warrior remained silent, his head bowed, as Jaelara paced the room. Her flowing cloak trailed behind her like liquid starlight. She paused, looking at a holographic map of the galaxy that floated before her. Where is he now? She demanded. Our scouts tracked his ship, the warrior replied. He'd narrowly escaped our fleet near the Darren Nebula. We have dispatched more units to intercept him. Jaelara waved her hand, and the hologram zoomed in on the coordinates. She studied the map for a moment, her sharp features illuminated by the glowing stars. No, she said finally. I will handle this myself. The warriors exchanged uneasy glances. One of them dared to speak. My queen, your power is unmatched, but to pursue this human personally. Silence. Jaelara's voice thundered through the room, silencing the warrior instantly. This is not about the human. It is about the principle. That sword is the heart of my legacy, the key to my empire's restoration. I will not allow it to remain in filthy, unworthy hands. She extended her arm, and a staff materialized in her grasp. glowing with dark energy. Her warriors bowed even lower as her power pulsed through the chamber. "Prepare my ship," Jalera commanded. "The thief will face my wrath, and the galaxy will remember why I am queen." As her warriors hurried to obey, Jalera turned back to the map. Her lips curled into a dangerous smile. "Run, little human," she whispered. "It will make catching you all the more satisfying." Marcus leaned back in his chair, staring at the glowing sword strapped to the wall of his ship. He could feel its energy even from a distance, as if it were alive. Luna, his AI assistant, broke the silence, her tone uneasy. "Marcus, I've detected another energy signature closing in on us." Marcus groaned, rubbing his temples. "Let me guess, Canary." "No," Luna said, her voice growing even more serious. "It's far more powerful. It matches the energy of the sword. I believe it's her." "Her?" Marcus frowned, sitting up straight. "You mean Jalera?" "Yes," Luna replied. "The queen herself, and she's coming fast." Marcus's stomach tightened. He had narrowly escaped the Canary fleet earlier, but this was different. If Jalera herself was coming, there was no way to outmatch her in power. His mind raced, searching for options. "How long do we have?" he asked. "Approximately 20 minutes, Luna said. "Her ship will reach us before we can make another hyperspace jump." "Great," Marcus muttered, standing up and pacing the cockpit. "So, we're sitting ducks." Luna hesitated before responding. There may be a way to evade her. Marcus stopped pacing and turned toward the console. "I'm listening." "There's a nearby asteroid field," Luna explained, projecting a holographic map of the system. "If we navigate through it, her ship's size and speed might work against her." Marcus studied the map, weighing the risks. "And if we crash into one of those asteroids?" "Well," Luna said, "then we won't have to worry about the queen." "Comforting," Marcus muttered sarcastically. "All right, plot the course. Let's see if we can survive this." The Orion adjusted its trajectory, speeding toward the asteroid field. The glowing rocks loomed ahead, spinning lazily in the darkness of space. Each one was massive enough to obliterate the ship on impact. "Entering the asteroid field now," Luna announced as the shift shields activated. Marcus gripped the controls tightly, maneuvering the ship between the tumbling rocks. The cockpit was filled with warning alarms as debris scraped against the shields, but he focused, his heart pounding in his chest. Behind them, Jalera's sleek black warship emerged from hyperspace. Its design was beautiful and deadly, with sharp edges that glowed faintly in the void. From her throne-like command seat, Jalera watched the human small ship dart into the asteroid field. "Foolish," she murmured, her violet eyes narrowing. "You can't run from me." Her ship surged forward, cutting through the field with precision. Smaller rocks disintegrated as they struck the ship's powerful shields. Marcus glanced at the rear monitor, his pulse spiking when he saw her ship closing in. "She's not slowing down," Marcus shouted. "Keep moving," Luna urged. "We're almost through." Marcus pushed the Orion harder, weaving between the asteroids. Just as Jalera's ship seemed ready to overtake them, a massive asteroid tumbled into her path. She smirked, raising her hand. The asteroid shattered with a single blast of energy. "She's toying with us," Marcus muttered, sweat dripping down his brow. "We can't outrun her." As the Orion cleared the field, Marcus realized one thing. Running wasn't enough. He needed to find a way to fight back or reason with her. And fast. The Orion emerged from the asteroid field, its shields flickering from the damage they had sustained. Marcus exhaled sharply, his hands trembling as he eased the controls. The glowing sword on the wall seemed brighter now, as if reacting to the intensity of the chase. "Marcus," Luna said, her voice steady but grave. "She's still following us. We bought some time, but she's closing in again." Marcus glanced at the rear monitor, which displayed Jalera's sleek warship cutting through the last of the asteroids. It moved with the grace of a predator stalking its prey. "She's not going to stop," Marcus muttered, pacing the cockpit. If I run, she'll just hunt me down. If I fight, well, I don't stand a chance. Luna hesitated. There might be a third option. Marcus paused. I'm listening. You can try talking to her, Luna suggested. She's after the sword, not your life. If you surrender it, she might let you go. Marcus frowned, staring at the glowing weapon. He didn't trust Shelara. Everything about her, from the fury in her eyes during the vision to the power of her ship, screamed danger. But what choice did he have? All right, he said, his voice tense. Open a channel. A moment later, the cockpit filled with static before a cold, commanding voice came through. Human. Marcus swallowed hard. He could feel the weight of her presence even through the comlink. Queen Shelara, I assume. Indeed, she replied, her tone sharp and unyielding. You have something that belongs to me. I didn't mean to take it, Marcus said quickly. I found it in a cavern. I didn't know what it was. Yet you kept it, Shelara countered, her voice laced with disdain. Did you think you could wield its power? A mere human. I don't want its power, Marcus said firmly. I just wanted answers. There was a brief pause, then Shelara's voice softened slightly, though it remained dangerous. You will return the sword to me. Now. Marcus hesitated, his eyes flicking to the weapon. And what happens to me if I do? That depends on you, Shelara said. Prove you are not a thief, and I may spare your life. Resist, and I will take the sword from your cold, broken hands. Marcus sighed. He didn't have the firepower to win a fight, and running would only delay the inevitable. With a heavy heart, he reached for the sword, its hilt warm under his touch. Fine, he said. I'll meet you halfway. But no tricks. I don't want to end up as space dust. Shelara's laugh was low and chilling. You amuse me, human. You have courage, but you are in no position to negotiate. Prepare to be boarded. The transmission cut off, and Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. As her warship loomed closer, he tightened his grip on the sword. This better work, he muttered, or I'm dead. The Orion shook as Shelara's docking clamps locked onto it. The Queen was coming, and Marcus wasn't ready. The Orion shuddered as Shelara's warship locked onto it. Marcus stood in the middle of the cockpit, gripping the glowing sword tightly. His heart pounded in his chest, and his palms were damp with sweat. Marcus, Luna said cautiously, her ship's airlock is opening. They'll board us any moment. Yeah, I noticed, Marcus muttered, his voice tense. Got any brilliant ideas? Don't provoke her, Luna replied. Give her the sword and try to survive this. Marcus nodded, though he didn't feel confident. He adjusted his jacket, trying to look less like a nervous wreck, and waited. Moments later, the hiss of decompressing air filled the ship as the airlock door slid open. She entered. Queen Shelara was even more intimidating in person. She towered over Marcus, her iridescent skin shimmering in the dim light of the cockpit. Her violet eyes glowed with an intensity that made Marcus feel like she could see right through him. She wore a flowing black and silver cloak, her regal presence filling the small space. Behind her, two heavily armed Sinari warriors stood silently, their weapons at the ready. Marcus swallowed hard and forced himself to speak. Queen Shelara. Silence, she commanded, her voice echoing with authority. She stepped closer, her gaze fixed on the sword in Marcus's hands. You have caused me great inconvenience, human. Do you understand the gravity of your actions? I didn't know. Marcus began, but her sharp glare silenced him. You touched what was never meant for you, she continued, her tone cold. That sword is the heart of my empire, the symbol of my rule. And you, a fragile creature, dared to claim it. Marcus gritted his teeth, struggling to maintain his composure. I didn't claim it. I found it, and I'm trying to give it back. Shelara tilted her head, studying him with a mixture of curiosity and contempt. You truly mean to return it, not to use it for your own gain. I don't want power, Marcus said, holding the sword out toward her. I just want to stay alive. Jalara's eyes narrowed, and for a moment, the air grew heavy with tension. Slowly, she extended her hand. As her fingers brushed the hilt, a surge of energy radiated through the room. Marcus stumbled back, nearly dropping the weapon, but Jalara held firm. The sword glowed brighter, responding to her touch. A faint smile curved her lips, but it was not one of gratitude. It was one of triumph. So, she said softly, her eyes locking onto Marcus. You returned it. Yet the sword awakened for you. Why? Marcus blinked, confused. What are you talking about? Jalara stepped closer, the sword still in her grasp. This blade chooses its wielder, human. It does not awaken for the unworthy. And yet it responded to you. Why? Marcus had no answer. All he could do was stare as the queen's expression shifted from anger to something far more dangerous, curiosity. Jalara's violet eyes burned into Marcus as she held the sword, her fingers tracing the ancient runes on its hilt. The air between them crackled with tension, and Marcus could feel the weight of her gaze, as if she were weighing every part of him. Why did the sword choose you, human? Jalara asked again, her voice low but sharp. You are not a warrior. You are not of noble blood. Yet the sword responded to you. Tell me why. Marcus shifted uncomfortably. He had no answer for her. The sword's power, its call, had been beyond his understanding. It wasn't something he had sought. It had simply happened. And now, faced with the anger and curiosity of a powerful alien queen, Marcus couldn't help but feel small. I don't know, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Maybe it's a mistake. I'm just an archaeologist. I wasn't looking for power, just answers. Jalara's lips curled into a smile, but it was not one of kindness. It was a smile full of danger. A smile that sent a chill down Marcus's spine. A mistake, she repeated, her voice dripping with disbelief. A mistake that led you to my sword. A mistake that allowed you to touch what has been lost for centuries. Marcus opened his mouth to speak, but Jalara held up a hand, silencing him. Her warriors behind her shifted, their hands resting on their weapons, waiting for a signal. I see, Jalara said after a moment. You are not the first to try to wield my sword. Many have come before you, thinking they could control it. But they failed. Some died. Some vanished into the dark corners of the galaxy. And yet, you, an insignificant human, managed to awaken it. Marcus swallowed hard. He could feel the pressure of her words, the weight of her expectations. She was testing him, that much was clear. But he didn't know what kind of test this was. I'm not here to take your empire, Jalara, he said, trying to hold his ground. I just want to go back to my life. I don't want any part of your war or your power. I just want to survive. Jalara's eyes narrowed. You think this is a game. You think I care about your life, human. No, Marcus began, but Jalara cut him off. If you are so determined to keep this sword, then prove your worth, she declared. I will give you a choice, human. A test. If you pass, you may keep your life. If you fail, you will pay the price for your insolence. Marcus's heart skipped a beat. He had no idea what kind of test she had in mind, but there was no way out now. He had already crossed a line by keeping the sword, and now it seemed like Jalara was going to force him to prove himself or die trying. Jalara raised a hand and gestured to one of her warriors. The warrior stepped forward, holding a massive weapon, a blade that glowed with the same energy as Jalara's sword. You will face my champion, she said, her voice cold. Defeat him, and I will consider your worth. Fail, and you will never leave this ship alive. Marcus's eyes widened. He wasn't a fighter. He had no chance against a warrior like that. But if he didn't fight, if he didn't prove himself, he wouldn't leave this ship at all. Fight, Jalara commanded, her gaze unwavering. The warrior in front of Marcus was enormous, muscles rippling beneath his armor, his dark eyes glowing with anticipation. His weapon, a jagged blade that hummed with energy, looked as if it could cut through steel with ease. Marcus swallowed hard. This was no ordinary opponent. This was a champion of Jalara's empire, and he was expected to defeat him. The Orion's small cockpit was now a distant memory. They stood on the cold, metal floor of Jalara's warship, surrounded by the queen and her warriors. The air felt thick, the tension almost suffocating. The weight of the sword still rested heavily in Marcus's hands, but he had no idea how to use it. He wasn't a soldier. He wasn't trained for combat. He was just a man who had found something he never should have touched. "You think you can survive this?" Jalara's voice echoed in his mind, cold and unfeeling. "You will face him, or I will kill you myself." Marcus gripped the sword tighter. It wasn't just Jalara's life that was at stake now. It was his. If he didn't fight, if he didn't somehow survive this test, he wouldn't make it out of her warship alive. The champion lifted his weapon, his stance wide and confident. "Are you ready, human?" he growled, his voice low and menacing. Marcus didn't answer. There was no point in trying to talk his way out of this. His only option was to fight. Without warning, the warrior lunged forward, swinging his massive blade in a wide arc. Marcus barely managed to step back, the sword barely missing him as the warrior's strength sent a gust of air past him. He felt the heat from the energy blade, and his heart skipped a beat. He couldn't keep dodging forever. He had to think fast. As the warrior advanced again, Marcus did something instinctive. He raised the sword in front of him, using it as a shield. The blade made contact with the warrior's strike, and sparks flew as the two weapons collided. The force of the blow sent Marcus stumbling backward, but he managed to keep his balance. Jalara's voice cut through the tension. "Impressive," she said, her tone calculating. "But will it be enough?" Marcus didn't answer her. He had no time for her games. He was already gasping for breath, his muscles screaming in protest as he raised the sword once more. His mind raced, trying to come up with a strategy, but there was no time. The warrior came at him again, faster this time. This was it. He had to survive this. He had no other choice. As the champion swung again, Marcus saw an opening. The warrior's momentum was carrying him forward. With a sudden burst of courage, Marcus stepped aside at the last second, using the sword to deflect the blow. The warrior overextended, his balance lost for just a moment. In that split second, Marcus struck. He swung the sword toward the warrior's side, aiming for the gap in his armor. The sword met its target, and the warrior grunted in surprise, stepping back, his eyes widening. The blow wasn't fatal, but it had given Marcus an opening. The champion growled in anger, clearly not expecting such a swift counterattack from the human. He gripped his weapon tighter, preparing for another strike. Marcus could feel the sword's power now. It wasn't just a weapon, it was a tool, a key that had awakened something within him. He just needed to hold on a little longer. Jalara watched the fight with cold eyes, her face impassive. The test wasn't just about the fight. It was about proving Marcus's will. And for a moment, just a moment, she was starting to wonder if the human could truly be worthy of the sword's power. Marcus's breath came in shallow gasps as he faced the towering warrior. His muscles screamed in pain, and his legs felt like they were about to give out. Sweat dripped down his face, stinging his eyes. But he couldn't stop. He couldn't give up. If he did, Jalara's champion would finish him without hesitation. The warrior stepped forward again, swinging his massive blade with deadly precision. Marcus barely dodged in time, the blade grazing his shoulder. He hissed in pain but forced himself to stay focused. His mind raced, trying to find a way to survive. He wasn't a fighter. He was a scientist, an explorer, but he couldn't let that stop him. The sword in his hand felt alive now, its energy pulsing with his heartbeat. "You're strong, human," the warrior growled, his voice dripping with disdain. "But strength alone will not save you." Marcus didn't respond. He wasn't going to let the warrior's words distract him. He needed a plan. The warrior came at him again, but this time, Marcus saw something he hadn't noticed before. The warrior's heavy armor had small gaps near his joints. They weren't obvious, but they were there. His arms, his legs, these were places Marcus could strike. As the warrior's blade swung down, Marcus acted on instinct. He ducked low, using the sword to parry the attack, then slid beneath the warrior's guard. In one fluid motion, he thrust the sword toward the gap in the warrior's armor, right above the knee. The warrior let out a roar of pain and staggered back, his blade falling to the side as he clutched his injured leg. Marcus didn't give him a moment to recover. He pressed his advantage, using the sword to strike again, this time toward the warrior's chest. But before Marcus could land a final blow, the warrior pushed him back with a powerful kick. Marcus stumbled, falling to the ground. The sword slipped from his hand, landing several feet away. He scrambled to his feet, his heart pounding. The warrior was recovering quickly, his face twisted in fury. "You're a fool," the warrior spat, his voice low and dangerous. "You've earned nothing. You will die for your arrogance." Jalara watched with a keen eye, her lips curling into a small, amused smile. She had seen many fall before her champion, but something about this human intrigued her. He was not the strongest, nor the most skilled, but there was a fire in him, a determination to survive. "Enough," she said suddenly, her voice commanding. "It's over." The warrior paused, confused. He looked to Jalara, his gaze filled with both surprise and frustration. "Do not waste my time," Jalara continued, her voice cold. "He has passed the test." Marcus, still on the ground, didn't know whether to be relieved or confused. He had just fought for his life, and now Jalara was calling it over. His chest was heaving as he tried to steady his breath, his mind racing. Jalara stepped forward, her eyes locking onto Marcus. "You are not the warrior I expected, human," she said, her voice surprisingly softer now. "But you have shown something far more important. Will. The sword has chosen you for a reason." Marcus looked up at her, still trying to make sense of what had just happened. He wasn't sure if he had won, or if Jalara was just toying with him. But one thing was clear, the fight wasn't over. It had only just begun. Marcus's heart still raced as he stood in front of Jalara, the queen's piercing gaze never leaving him. His body ached from the fight, but he was alive. He had passed her test, against all odds. Yet, as he caught his breath and wiped the sweat from his brow, he couldn't help but wonder what came next. Jalara's eyes studied him, her violet irises glowing softly. She was silent for a moment, her expression unreadable. The warrior who had fought him stood behind her, clearly annoyed, but Jalara didn't seem to care. Her attention was entirely on Marcus. "You've done well, human," she said, her voice unexpectedly calm. "You've proved that you have the will to survive, and that is something rare. Many who've tried to take my sword were consumed by their greed or fear. But not you. You fought to stay alive, and that has earned you something." Marcus straightened up, still unsure of what she meant. Was she offering him something, or was this just another trick? "What do you mean?" he asked, his voice rough from the fight. "I just fought because you forced me to. I didn't do it for anything else." Jalara took a step closer, her presence dominating the room. "It's not the fight that matters, Marcus Hale. It's what you do after." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. She had used his name. How did she know that? "I know much about you, human. I know about your past, your dreams of discovery. I know you seek knowledge, not power. The sword chose you for that reason." Marcus blinked in confusion. "The sword chose me. The sword does not choose based on strength, or skill, or even bloodline," Jalara explained. "It chooses based on something deeper, something in the heart. And it has chosen you, Marcus. It has chosen you because you are different. His mind whirled. This was too much. He had only wanted to return the sword and go home. Now he was hearing that he was chosen for something he didn't understand. Jailara's gaze softened, just for a moment. I offer you a choice, Marcus Hale. You can return the sword to me, as you originally intended, and leave this place. You will live free of my empire's pursuit, or you can keep the sword and stand by my side. With it, you will gain power beyond anything you can imagine. You will be a part of my empire's rise. Marcus's thoughts raced. He didn't want power. He didn't want to be a part of any empire, especially not one that had cost so many lives. But at the same time, the sword was calling to him. He could feel its power, and deep down, he knew that turning away from it might mean walking away from something he couldn't fully understand. Jailara watched him closely, waiting for his decision. The choice is yours, human. No one else will make it for you. Marcus glanced down at the sword in his hands. It had chosen him. He could feel the weight of that choice pressing down on him. He had never wanted power, but was there something bigger at play here? Was this his chance to do something meaningful, something that could change everything? He looked back up at Jailara, her gaze steady, unblinking. I'll return it to you, he said finally, his voice firm. I don't want the power. I just want to live. Jailara's expression didn't change. She took a deep breath, her lips curling into a small, almost imperceptible smile. As you wish, Marcus Hale. She stepped forward and took the sword from his hands. For a moment, there was no sound, just the hum of the ship's engines in the background. You've chosen wisely, Jailara said softly. But remember this, human. The sword is a part of me, and in the future, our paths may cross again. Marcus nodded, feeling the weight of the moment. The choice was made, and he had chosen to walk away from the power that could have been his. As the airlock doors opened, Marcus stepped out of the warship, the cold, endless void of space stretching before him. He didn't know what the future held, but for the first time, he felt free.